let's talk a little bit about hormonal imbalance, because a lot of women are struggling right now with symptoms like irregular cycles, mood swings, maybe low energy.
Yeah.
What is the first steps they can take to start healing and reconnecting?
Again, coming back to nature, just doing these little things. So your sleep cycles are very, very important because a lot of our hormones are actually processing, and we have a higher secretion of course, certain hormones as we're sleeping. So if we're not prioritizing sleep on a proper schedule, then we're running into difficulties. And that's why, proper sleep hygiene. So trying to go to bed, at the same time every night, trying to wake up in the morning as the light is coming up, so close to sunrise, as a natural thing. And you know that you're getting healthier when you don't need your alarm clock anymore. You're not stressed out when you're going to sleep. As soon as your head hits the pillow, within a few moments, you have that deep restful sleep. You remember your dreams, another indication that you've gotten into that deep and restful sleep. But again, our body detoxifies as we're sleeping, so it becomes very, very important. That's one of the things that one of the first conversations that I have with women is, you've got to prioritize your sleep.
Welcome to the Brain Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Patrick Porter. Please join us on our mission to better a billion brains. Enjoy the episode and remember to share it with your family and friends.
Today we have a very special guest, Dr. Janine Bowring. She's a naturopath. She's a trailblazer. She's a naturopathic doctor. She has over 25 years of clinical research. So we're not just talking to somebody who just fell off the banana boat and decided to start doing natural medicine. This is somebody who's been doing it for a long time. Actually, she's got 2.5 million followers on social media. So people are listening to her advice, and we're very lucky to have her here on the Brain Fitness Podcast. So Dr. Bowring, thanks for being on the call.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Dr. Porter. It's great to be able to connect with you, and I know we're going to have a great conversation today.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about what got you into all of this. Why did you decide to become a natural medicine doctor? Because I know that, when people think of, now it's becoming more and more in vogue because medical doctors are leaving and actually going to get their MD degree because they have to figure out that medicine isn't working. But what prompted you to get into it so early?
Well, yeah, it's a very personal story. Unfortunately, I lost my mom to cancer at a very young age. She died at the age of 50. I was 19 at the time. And she was first diagnosed at the age of 44 with breast cancer. And it was something that, with her German upbringing, she was always into educating herself about how to do things more naturally. And she was actually in her remission years, after her first diagnosis, she was reading a book at that time that was written by a naturopathic doctor, which was sort of unheard of at the time, right? Nobody knew what that was. And me being in high school, I was fascinated by the information in this book, and I would refer to it and say, wow, something like eating, more garlic can help to thin the blood. And, I was just so fascinated. And my friends in high school would actually consult me, and they started back then calling me Dr. Janine, because if they had little aches and pains or issues, with their health, they would ask me, okay, what do we do? What do we do? And I would refer to my little book that my mom had. And so it was, of course, unfortunately, after losing her to cancer, it was something that was always sort of ingrained in me that, yes, there is power in foods and whole foods that we can actually really have an impact on our health, how stress is so much correlated to, not doing so well with, negative health outcomes, especially when you've been given a diagnosis like cancer. So it was something that, in my university years, and originally I actually wanted to become an optometrist, and I sort of learned about this naturopathic college. A friend asked me, hey, just come and check this out with me. And at that time, only one naturopathic college in Canada. I went for the open house, and I just knew that this is what I had to pursue. So it's always been my passion to really educate people, because I think that's a big piece of, actually making changes for yourself is to know more. And that's why, I do so much work on social media, just to give that education piece to people, so that they can empower themselves over their own health and maybe make healthier choices as they go.
That's great. We have a couple things in common then, because unfortunately my mother died at a very early age, 49 years old, but she also got us into natural medicine. She took us to an iridologist, and
Yes.
I was actually voted in high school to replace Yule Gibbons in the Grape Nuts commercials. I don't know if you remember him, but that was a long time ago.
My
He used to
goodness.
do these commercials. He said, you could get everything you need from a pine cone or something, So that was they made fun of me because we always brought our bag lunch and we always ate healthy. And my track coach, because I was pretty good at sports, I was a sport captain, and he said, "Don't take those pills out in public," because they nobody was taking vitamins and minerals then, So
Right,
it's really
right.
weird, and we didn't even have a weight room in our room. So things have really changed, and thank God we have mothers that are smart enough to
Yes.
go out and look for solutions. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, she actually died of cancer as well. So
I'm so
it was a
sorry.
bad
Yeah.
thing. Uh,
Yeah.
but she started a whole family, 9 of us. We were all spazzes. She took us off sugar, read all the dyes and everything
Yeah.
we know to do today. We were
Of
doing in the
course.
70s, and people thought we were crazy. And we were living in Michigan, so when I grew up,
Wow.
I figured out I should have been in California or something. That's because they that's where they were eating in California then. But we were. I know that nutrition has a lot to do with it and things of that
Yeah.
nature. So you specialize though in working with the hormonal imbalances. So tell me,
Yes. Yeah.
in today's world, I mean, it's so fast paced. We got 24-hour news cycles. We got stress out the wazoo. People are they don't know where they're going. They read one book, it says this thing, another
Yeah.
says that, and everybody thinks they need a pill for every ill. What's your solution? Tell us a little bit about why you came up with what you're doing.
Yeah, so this is, it's been a work in progress, working on my third book, which is due to launch now. Super exciting, but this one took me the longest to write. And it was because I wanted to tie in, yes, what we know from science and what the data shows us, but at the same time, reconnecting back with nature, because we've really lost, especially in this part of the world, in North America, we have completely disconnected from nature. And I even think of myself, growing up as a kid, always outside, no socks, no shoes, you're out in the sun all day, you never get tired. When the street lights come on, you go inside, it's dark, and you go to bed, right? Because you're exhausted, because that is your normal circadian rhythm, which is tied into the dark and the light cycle of the day. But because we now have our devices on, where we have so much screen time, we have this artificial blue light and this non-native EMF, so the electromagnetic fields, which of course are not natural, not the natural ones from the earth and from the sun, but these non-native EMFs, they're impacting our health in so many negative ways that aren't yet even discovered. I mean, there's a lot of science coming out now that's actually showing these correlations as to how this is actually affecting our physiology and our hormones. And we know, of course, the hormone of darkness, melatonin, there's a direct effect with having our screens on, at the wrong time of day and suppressing that melatonin secretion, of course, and now we can't sleep, and now we're not well rested, and now we become addicted to all the wrong things like the sugar and the caffeine, which further offsets our brain chemistry, as we know, and we get into these negative patterns. And then, okay, what is the fix for that? Yes, there is modern medicine, sleeping pills as an example, but is that really getting at the root cause as to why we have this problem in the first place, which is that circadian biology mismatch as to how we're naturally as mammals supposed to live in the world. So that's where I've done a lot of research in, the last 5 years on my book, and it's just been, so wonderful to be able to see that now the data is coming out and they're starting to study, blue light toxicity and EMFs and what that is doing to ourselves. But it's just so simple. And that's what I love about it, is that, the fix for a lot of this is so simple. Do what we're supposed to do as mammals. Think about animals that are out in the wild. They're outside all day, right? Under the sun. If you get too much sun, you go into the shade. I mean, it's very, very simple, yet we've become so disconnected. And as to your point as well, there's so much misinformation out there in terms of stay out of the sun, use your sunscreen, wear sunglasses, protection, 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 which is actually for our physiology completely false. So there has to be a way that we can do this in a safe way with reconnecting with nature. And that's everything that I share in my next book now.
Yeah, that's great. I know that I used to own a franchise company, which was for weight loss, and our average weight loss at that time was only 25 pounds a woman needed to lose. When I sold that franchise in 2004, it was already up to over 45 pounds.
Wow.
I don't know where it's at right now, but I'm sure it's more than that. because
I'm
of,
sure, yeah.
a lot of people don't understand what's going on with the body, the stress of the body, and how the liver produces glucagon and pumps it into the system, and the insulin drip and all of that things. But you figured out some solutions for women, because many women are struggling with weight gain, fatigue, and craving, and they don't realize that there's some leptin resistance. That's what you found out.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
what are some natural holistic ways that we can support this function?
Yeah, so leptin resistance is something that it's not a term that a lot of people have heard about. And leptin, often people confuse it with lectin. Lectins is something in food. This is not what we're talking about. We're talking about the hormone leptin, which is secreted by our fat cells. And it is implicated in our brain function, because the brain has to read our leptin levels. And what the brain does with that information when it's working properly is it shuts down our hunger. So we're less hungry. So the more body fat that we have, the less hungry we become. And that's our natural physiology, because obviously if we have enough body fat, we don't need to seek out more food and eat more and more and more to put on more body fat. So there's this whole feedback mechanism with leptin. Now what happens is something called leptin resistance. And this is very common amongst women, especially that I have found in the perimenopausal years, leading up to menopause, which we know can start, as early as the late 30s, right up until menopause, actual menopause, which the average age is around 51, 52 years of age. And of course, it's differing for everyone. But this leptin resistance, which is never discussed or talked about even with doctors, because most doctors don't even know what it is at the root cause as to how we have become so disconnected from nature. And this is, something that getting that natural sunlight exposure is going to activate something called POMC. Now, POMC is going to help, as a downstream effect, is going to be cleaved, and this is going to help with making more melanin in your skin to help with more sun protection. So this whole thing about, not going in the sun and putting on sunscreen, you're compromising this whole system. If you're eating too much sugar, this will also mess up the leptin receptor, and now you are increasing your risk of that leptin resistance. And the brain is phenomenal, as you know, right? Because this is part of your life's work, of course, is tapping into the brain. And, the brain is always reading. It's always taking measurements as to, okay, how are we here? And there's all these feedback loops. And this is where, in mainstream medicine, often, even with herbal medicines and, the injection drugs now for weight loss, there's always going to be a feedback loop that you have to think about. And if you're or even with, and I educate a lot of women about, taking the hormones. So whether that's, a testosterone gel or, your estrogen, progesterone creams, patches, and all these things. Yes, it's one thing to be asymptomatic now in terms of your hormone fluxes and what's happening, and why you're miserable as a woman. But at the same time, what's happening, because that's an endogenous hormone that now you're supplying to the body, what are the downstream effects of this? And this is where, you might get away with it for a few years, 5, 10 years, and you're feeling great, but downstream, 10 years, 15 years, that's what I'm talking about when I talk about longevity. What is the outcome here? Are you putting yourself at higher risk for things like cancer and other diseases? So this is where it becomes important to, maybe let's get to the root cause. Is it leptin resistance? Leptin resistance can be fixed. And some of my tips that I share is, make sure that you're limiting those carbohydrates, especially the highly refined carbohydrates, which can cause more of an inflammatory response in your body, shut down your leptin receptor. And now you've got that leptin resistance, which, by the way, the leptin resistance usually precedes the insulin resistance. So we hear, everybody's talking about insulin resistance. Well, it's the leptin resistance that happened first. And if you don't address that leptin resistance, then you're always going to go down that path of coming back to the leptin resistance, even if you're balancing your blood glucose levels, and the fat simply won't come off because the brain is still getting that signal that, we're okay with leptin. No, it's not okay if you've got the resistance. So that's just one tip. Another tip is doing cold exposure. Another, thing that I talk about in my book is that cold exposure really does help with the mitochondria. helps with uncoupling protein, which is going to help to actually create more body heat for your body, which is something that can really burn off body fat very quickly, especially for women, especially if it's that sort of cortisol related belly fat around the midsection, which we all know, men and women, it's the most difficult to try to burn off, as well as, stopping your snacking between meals. We need to have a bit of a break there, increasing seafood in your diet, which is loaded with minerals, really important for women for balancing our hormones, but also that DHA. So the DHA, docosahexaenoic acid, that important omega-3 fatty acid, which of course feeds our cell membranes. It makes sure that that electrical current that runs through our body can do so. When we're lacking in DHA, which a lot of people are, that becomes very important as well. So these are, making sure that you're wearing the blue light blocking glasses if you're under artificial lights, making sure that you're getting enough sunlight exposure. I mean, very simple things, getting grounded. Something that I coined a term, Mother Nature's prescription, which is sort of the subtitle of my book, following Mother Nature's prescription, which is very simple. Get outside, be in nature, listen to, natural sounds of nature like birdsong, very, very healing to balance the hormones. Going out and walking in the forest, in Japan is called forest walking and Shinrin Yuku, right? It's called, forest bathing. And the studies have shown that helps to lower cortisol levels. And it seems so simple, but at the same time, are we doing it? No, most times we're not. Right? So we just have to take time to reconnect with nature, doing these simple things that will fix the leptin problem, which I myself, and this is how I know that, it works, because I myself had a leptin issue. I was hungry all the time, and, weight would fluctuate. And I being on television, I had to be very strict and restrictive with my diet in terms of, because when you're on I don't know, not everybody who's on TV cares, but I'm on, national television once a month, and I'm like, okay, if I'm looking like unhealthy or too big for my body frame, it's not a good thing. So, and I did have a leptin resistance problem. And until I solved it for myself and did all the research on it, I could say, wow, this is like such a missing link for, I know so many women in terms of their hormones and their moods and, sleep patterns and cravings and all these things, the belly fat, all of these things related back to that leptin signaling. So, it's been really helpful for myself and of course everybody that I've educated about, fixing these hormonal signals, which does tie back to your brain chemistry and making sure that you, again, are reconnecting with nature.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and I always talk about people, it's not always, it's a big deal what they're eating, obviously, that's a big cause, but their body is producing sugar, right, from the liver.
Yes.
Every time they have a stressful response. So stress causes this problem in women, and it's a major disruptor in the hormonal system for women and men. But can you share some of our natural-based techniques or rituals that can help lower the cortisol? I mean, because really we should have high cortisol in the morning, obviously, to get out of bed and get running. But then as the day goes on, it's going to diminish. But some people wake up, their cortisol trough isn't even there. So tell us a little bit about how you've learned to regulate that and some techniques.
Yeah, so with cortisol, it's interesting because when you have the leptin resistance, so number one, fixing that leptin resistance becomes very important because this is all tied into your cortisol, and the leptin resistance further aggravates something called pregnenolone-Steele syndrome. And this is where your body preferentially is going to make more and more cortisol in times of stress, but in that inflammatory response and when you have that leptin resistance. So going back to the leptin story, very important, but with your cortisol, something as simple as just taking like 2 minutes of deep breathing, meditation, maybe doing brain tap, right, with binaural beats and making sure that your brain is sort of hitting that reset button, getting into that parasympathetic part of the autonomic nervous system, just that reset to tell your body as well and your brain that you're safe. Because I think, speaking from a woman's perspective, a lot of our day, we don't feel safe and secure and connected. And that, at a more ethereal kind of level, I'm safe. I have a home. I have food and water, but I'm talking about, okay, do I feel safe in the fact that I've got to get my kids to school on time? I've got to get back, make sure that I put some food in my body so I've got a bit of energy. I got to get to the office on time. I have to make sure that I don't forget to get the groceries to make my dinner tonight. Like, those are little increments of time during the day where we don't necessarily feel safe. And what happens? Our cortisol goes through the roof, right? So just having that kind of, that even as much as, and as stressful as our day is, especially as a woman, and that's offsetting our hormones, we've got to keep telling ourselves we're safe, we're good. That's why I love meditation, deep breathing, taking that, I'm all about the sun exposure, so taking little breaks in the day. Whenever I have the opportunity, every day, like even before we came to do the podcast, I took like 30 seconds. I just went outside, thankfully, because we're in Canada, close to Toronto. And we haven't had a lot of sun. So, whenever we see that sun, I was so thankful and just took 30 seconds, and just appreciated the fact that, I'm connected with nature, even though I'm coming in now to the studio, but I can take those little instances during the day and reconnect. So that's one thing. And it's a process. I mean, your cortisol levels aren't necessarily going to be balanced, in a couple days. This is something that you have to work on, consciously. Again, from a woman's perspective, because we have a lot of challenges during the day. We have a lot of things. A man's brain and a woman's brain, it's not the same, right? And so, again, from the way that our brain, the left and right sides of our brain are linked, as a woman, that corpus callosum, like things are just firing and wiring all the time that we don't compartmentalize as much as the guys do, and most men. I'm generalizing, of course. So this is something that, just making sure that we're feeling okay. So that's why, meditation, grounding, something else, something, a little ritual you can do for yourself every morning, which is so healthy. The first thing I do when I wake up, I come downstairs, go outside on the concrete without my shoes, and just, even if the sun's not out, I'm just reconnecting. I'm listening to, when the birds are out, I'm listening to the birds, just making these little connections during the day. It doesn't have to be a long time. You don't have to spend a long time doing these things, but you start to even appreciate nature more and how we are so interconnected, and you start to notice things about weather patterns and, how this can affect how you're feeling every day.
Yeah. As you talk about grounding, brain fitness, they know that we had Clint Oprah on. He's a good friend of mine. He wrote the book called Earthing.
Yes,
And,
love that book.
We have at our office, underneath our keyboards, we have a grounding mat. So we tell them, every 10, 15 minutes, just touch that grounding mat, because that energy builds up in our cells, and it's a disruptor, because the signaling system of the body isn't working.
Yeah. So I love his book. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're always. I know Meryl Hemingway, who's a good friend too. She's one of their spokespeople. She always talks about. She calls it Dr. Sun and Dr. Earth or whatever. She's talking about there's 7 doctors, but they're all natural. They're free.
Of course.
You can go outside and get them, but people don't use them because they stay inside, which is a sad thing. So let's talk a little bit about hormonal imbalance, because a lot of women are struggling right now with symptoms like irregular cycles, mood swings, maybe low energy.
Yeah.
What is the first steps they can take to start healing and reconnecting with nature? What do you recommend when somebody comes in to see you? What is like your plan for them?
Yeah, so coming back to nature, just doing these little things. So your sleep cycles are very, very important, because a lot of our hormones are actually processing, and we have a higher secretion of course, certain hormones as we're sleeping. So if we're not prioritizing sleep on a proper schedule, then we're running into difficulties. And that's why, proper sleep hygiene. So trying to go to bed, at the same time every night, trying to wake up in the morning as the light is coming up, so close to sunrise, as a natural thing. And you know that you're getting healthier when you don't need your alarm clock anymore. You're not stressed out when you're going to sleep. As soon as your head hits the pillow, within a few moments, you have that deep, restful sleep. You remember your dreams, another indication that you've gotten, into that deep and restful sleep. But again, our body detoxifies as we're sleeping. So it becomes very, very important. That's one of the things that, one of the first conversations that I have with women is, you've got to prioritize your sleep. And that's when a lot of your weight loss actually happens as well. So for those women that are struggling with that belly fat or their hormonal weight gain, we have to optimize our sleep. Thyroid function as well is something that I like to concentrate on, because again, your thyroid is tied back, and often it's not. So for a lot of women, low thyroid is a very common, phenomenon. However, a lot of times it's not actually a thyroid problem per se. We know that thyroid stimulating hormone is a brain, right, hormone that is first triggering the stimulation, like thyroid, let's go. We got to get going here to help to speed up metabolism. And a lot of women are slow and low in their thyroid because of something, again, upstream from that, which is, again, ties back to the leptin. So this is where, satiety and, feeling satisfied after a meal, not craving the food all the time, your metabolism, your energy levels throughout the day. This ties back, again, to that leptin story, and that then translates into what's happening with your thyroid. So I like to focus on these things. Mineral deficiencies is a big one as well. Magnesium deficiency, huge. And, a lot of people do take magnesium. In my opinion, it's not always the right type. There's like 7 different types of magnesium or more types of magnesium that you could take. Those are sort of the main ones. My preferred type is a magnesium bisglycinate, so bound to glycine, which works. And here's the story about glycine, which is interesting. Glycine, in our modern farming, especially in this part of the world, with glyphosate, has become very depleted in our foods as well. And that glycine works like a neurotransmitter. Glycine helps to stimulate our glutathione levels, our master antioxidant. So because of modern farming, modern agriculture, if you eat foods that may contain glyphosate, like corn and wheat, so your flours and, baked goods and things, that unfortunately, yes, you've created a magnesium deficiency because that modern agriculture has chelated that magnesium. We're not getting it in the food. Plus now you have a glycine deficiency. So that's one of the reasons why I really like the magnesium bisglycinate, especially for balancing the hormones as well, because you can take it, at a good dosage without causing bowel, issues, and it is a natural muscle relaxant. But also helps in terms of metabolizing your carbs, your fats, and your protein. So on multi-levels, and it's very protective for our modern world. So as women, as we know, we're on technology, not compared to when I was a kid, you have that big television screen, which is like the size of a piece of furniture. It's not the same, right? Now our EMFs are everywhere, and we have 5G, and we have, Wi-Fi routers, and this is something that we definitely want to make sure that we're optimizing our magnesium levels as women to balance our hormones. So that becomes very important because most of us, I believe, if we're not actively supplementing, then we will be deficient. So seafood is also great to get some magnesium in, but not everybody's eating enough seafood like raw oysters every day. It's not feasible for most people. So that would be another one. And of course there are herbal medicines. So again, tapping back into Mother Nature, this is where I'm more of the school of, okay, let's stimulate our own hormones in a natural way with herbal medicines versus, a lot of women do go the route of taking, creams, patches, and things of these hormones, which, like I said at the beginning, I think there might be some damage down the road that you can't foresee now when you're feeling better because your hormones are more balanced. I prefer to go, okay, what has Mother Nature given us? And there are some great herbal medicines to be able to do that, like chaste tree berry, black cohosh. These are all fantastic herbal medicines. Maca, adaptogenic herb, which is great for the cortisol aspects of why the hormones are out of balance. So going those routes I would prefer, definitely. And personally, that's the route that I like to go, is with the herbal medicines versus, some of the other ways. And yeah, it's every woman is different. And in terms of the way that you choose to balance your hormones, to find the balance is up to you. But at the same time, just knowing that there may be on the other side of things, some downstream effects that may not be the best in terms of outcomes. I'm talking 10, 15 years from now. And that's where I think in health, it's okay to have, short-term outlook, but I'm always about the long game, right? And it's all about longevity. Like in terms of movement, for instance, we all know we have to exercise. We need to move. But is the movement that you're doing today, is that going to translate into longevity? Are you taking care of your hip mobility and your ankles and your feet and wearing the barefoot shoes? Not things that everybody thinks about, right? Yeah, we want to maintain our muscle mass, men and women, at a certain age because we know it's on the decline, right? But at the same time, what's the long-term goal here?
Yeah, I don't think they realize when they have that leptin resistance and insulin resistance, the body will start cannibalizing the muscle.
Yes,
It'll get its energy
exactly.
some way, and it'll get it
Yeah.
from the most pure
Yeah.
source. So that's really good.
Yeah.
So we're here at Brain Fitness Podcast. We're talking to Dr. Janine, and she's an expert in all things to do with natural medicine, and she's a natural medicine doctor. You can find out more about her at Dr. Janine Bowring. We're going to have .com. We're going to have all the links in the show notes. She also has a YouTube channel, which a lot of followers, so she gives tips and tricks like you've heard here today. She has an Instagram channel at Dr. Janine, and then she has TikTok as well, J9 Naturally. Again, we're going to put all these below. But I want to get into now a little bit about your new book because it's pretty exciting, The Lost Medicine, Rediscovering Mother Nature's Prescription. And we're going to have a link in the show notes to the landing page for that. So it's going to be released in May. So probably when you're watching this, it'll be released. And you can go there and start looking at what she's doing for her new book. But tell us, what are we going to learn in the new book? What have you learned? What's the newest things that you've learned? Because nutrition is always changing and how the body, they just found out in 2018 that our epigenetic system actually, we don't have 99% junk DNA anymore. Every 40 seconds, it changes every cell's function because of DNA signaling that changes every 40 seconds. So what have you been finding out? There's so many things changing out there in the world with all the technology we have. What's new and amazing that people are going to learn from your book?
Yeah. Well, and thank you for bringing this up. Yeah, it is, I think, one of the most remarkable things that I've learned in, the last 2.5, 3 years is the fact that eating a seasonal diet, again, it seems like common sense, but when I share this on social media, it's like, wow, really? Yeah, you know what? If you think about that, it does make sense. If we went back, 100, 200 years, what would we eat? We would eat what we could grow and what would be available to us, right? We didn't have the grocery store down the street that we drive to pick up our groceries and bring them home. And food shipped from all over the world. This is very different. So eating that seasonal diet in the location where you're living and at the time of year makes a big difference. And the reason for this is that food is programmed by the sun. So if you think about that, okay, so let's talk about like a mango or a banana, for instance. Well, where I live, they don't grow. So should I be eating that type of food, especially in the wintertime? And that's why I did a video, you can look it up, it's called No Bananas in Canada. And my kids are really happy now because we're getting some sunlight back, and I'll share why. Because now there's some bananas in the house again. Because in the winter, I didn't buy bananas because we don't have the natural sunlight, which does something, again, tying back to our insulin and that leptin signaling and POMC and all these things that we talk about from a physiological standpoint. That sunlight helps us to actually metabolize that food that is grown in that climate. So when we're not eating a seasonal local diet, then it is giving sort of like an epigenetic mismatch signal to our physiology saying that, this isn't what's supposed to be happening at this time of year, because remember, we're getting all the signal from the light and dark cycle of the day. The temperature is telling our cells, even our microbiome is programmed by the light. So we're getting these mismatches. So that is a big tip that I share in my book, which a lot of people don't talk about. But I think the more that you start following, the diet that is local to you in the right season, it has remarkable changes on your energy levels, on your anti-aging, like your skin cell, like the skin cell turnover. Everything changes for the better. In my experience and what I've shared, with the people who listen to me, that this really can make such a big difference. So that's just one example. Another thing that I have a whole chapter, of course, on leptin, as you can imagine. I have another chapter on the EMF. So our EMF exposure in our modern world, something that we need to be talking more and more about, I believe. And when you make these connections for yourself, it's highly research-based as well, so I share a lot of references in this book to show that, there has been some research done on the fact that, maybe your cell phone, not the safest and healthiest thing to have close to your brain, as an example. And I give a lot of practical tips, as I do on social media. If you've seen any of my videos, on my YouTube channel, I give so many tips as to, okay, yes, that's the problem, but what's the fix? What's something simple that you can do today to help to mitigate these risks? And so I have a whole list of, tips for EMF exposure. And which I think is really important, because it's not always something difficult, in terms of, keeping your phone at a distance and putting it on airplane mode whenever you can, versus having it up to your ear and always, using that cell phone signal that's coming and blasting your brain. Another one is try not to talk on your cell phone. I know it's hard for a lot of people who commute and you have conversations, but maybe try not to have that cell phone conversation when you're driving the car, because your car, think about it, it's like its own Faraday cage in a bad way, because it's bringing that cell phone signal into the car. You're surrounded by metal. It's like you're microwaving yourself. And if you've got kids in the car or a baby in the car, you're just irradiating yourself with something that's unnecessary. Yes, in emergencies, and that's why my husband's always mad. It's like, oh my goodness, you never have your phone on. I'm like, no, I don't always have my phone on, because I don't always get the call, because, I'm trying to, decrease that exposure.
Well, Dr. Janine's sharing tips from her new book, which we're going to have a link in the show notes. I'm going to recommend everybody go there, check it out, and share it with your family, your friends. Most people don't realize, but Dr. Cousins, years ago, actually over 20 years ago, in John Ott, who was the inventor of the Ott light generator, they were talking about light, and he actually says the most underprescribed nutrient on earth today is light. Because
absolutely.
You're talking about how it has so many different functions in the body. And so, as you think about it, it seems too simple. There's a saying, man is spirit's simple, but man is complex. People want it to be too complex, but you have some pretty simple solutions. They can read about them. They can learn about you from social media. They can follow you. They can, start to learn more about it. So what if I forgot to ask you that is burning inside, or what do you want to reinforce that you've already mentioned that the Brain Tap Nation you feel really needs to hone in on and take home?
I think being kind to yourself is important. As you said earlier, there's so much information in the health space and misinformation, and using your intuition. Here's the great thing about getting out into the sun and seeing that sunrise. It's almost like it's the program for the day. And when you start to do this as your own personal sort of health ritual, it's like you get a download from the sun rising in the morning as to opening up your intuition. And, especially when you're grounded, so you've got to, take off your socks and shoes, get grounded in the morning. And getting that download for the day, it is incredible how it opens up your brain and to intuitions and to, some of the steps that you need to follow for your day to have a healthier and a happier day. I mean, at the end of the day, that's why we're here. That's why we're having this conversation, is to, hopefully somebody's listening or watching that is going to be like, yeah, you know what? Like, that's not so difficult. But at the same time, it just makes you feel good, right? And that's what I think we need to share and have a community of people that, we're about being here to feel good. We don't want to always hear about, don't eat this, don't eat that, don't do this, don't do that. We want to feel good, and we want to take just these small little baby steps every day and share it with others to be able to do that. So, very, very simple little changes that you make in your daily life, that's what's going to make the big end changes. For a lot of people, you may have a terrible diagnosis. There may be something, that you're really afraid about with your health or with, a loved one's health. It's very simple changes, and having the right attitude about it and sort of bringing in that positive energy makes all the difference in the world, whether, you do well or not so well, how long you live or not so well, in terms of your lifespan. So I think we have a lot more power than what we think if we tune back into nature.
That's great. Now, a lot of people don't realize that it's not metaphysics anymore. It's science.
No,
the sun is beaming codes to your body. They call it the circadian rhythm. Everybody's temperature drops 2 degrees at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, increases 2 degrees in the middle of the night. We don't make as much melatonin if we don't get to sleep by 10 o'clock. We don't clean our liver if we don't get to bed by 11. All these things are happening because the sun is sending codes to us. So in our body has 10 billion miles of DNA. And it's actually a crystalline substance that actually absorbs light energy and transmits that to the cells through something called the biophotic system. So when you're working with all these systems, that's why light energy is so important. I mean, there's so much about that I have a new book coming out as well in October
Oh,
with,
great.
Hay House called The Brain Fitness Blueprint, where we talk about sunlight is so important in rituals. If you look at the ancient cultures, they didn't wake
Yeah.
up with alarm clocks. I love when you said that, because I always tell people, if you're waking up with an alarm clock, you have a neurological issue.
Yeah.
You just
Oh,
slept
yeah.
all night long. You don't need coffee first thing in the morning. If you want to have
Yep.
coffee later in the day, then have it. But it crushes that cortisol trough. You talked a little bit about that. Get the body's hormonal structure and process. We're going to have the show notes in the below. We're going to have all your links to your social medias. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. You've got a lot of followers listening to you, and hopefully Brain Tap Nation will start following you and learning about nutrition. I mean, we always say at Brain Tap that number one is nutrition. You cannot think a bad diet. So you can think you can, but you really can't. The body,
No.
when you go offline, because like Bruce Lipton says, 95% of your body is controlled by your subconscious. So you're trying to change your conscious mind, which is only 5%. So,
Right.
but when you put that food in, that food has its own vibratory frequency and nature. It's going to do what it does while you're doing what you're doing, and the body will do what it's doing while you're doing what it's doing. So the more you can help out the body, the more health and healing can happen. So appreciate you being here to do that. Number two, you also mentioned is movement. So many people are sitting all day long. The body needs to move and breathe, move and
Yes.
breathe and get out there in the sunlight, get grounded, do things like that. So that's excellent. And then what we always say is add in a piece of, you can do mindfulness, but what we recommend obviously is brainwave entrainment, because we want to train the brain in the morning to wake up the brain in something called SMR to get that. That's really when you're going to work with your cortisol trough. You're going to work with the dopamine, the norepinephrine, the cortisol, because that's when you need it in the morning. In ancient times,
Mm-hmm.
we woke up because we were part of the food chain. We didn't know if we were going to live or not. So we had to get up and move, right? And then in the middle of the day, we were taking naps. Nobody's doing that anymore. So do something to reboot your system in the middle of the day to, like you said, be kind to yourself, love yourself, appreciate yourself. We've actually shown studies that show that when people do that, they actually get, at the Google study we did with Microsoft and Google, they actually got 26% more work done when they took that 20-minute
Wow.
break. So
Amazing.
imagine people, it's kind of counterintuitive, right? You think, oh no, I can't stop doing this. But if you do stop doing that, reboot the system. This is a biological system. It's an electrical system, a chemical system. Our physiology needs care just as much as our brain needs care. So, and then when you get those three matrix working together, of course, then hopefully you have some kind of spiritual background that's going to help you to stay on purpose and on time. So appreciate you being here. Anything you want to leave any other messages you want to leave before we end the podcast today?
Well, thank you. I appreciate, your wonderful questions, and, it was such a great conversation that we had today. I hope to inspire people to, it's not the big steps, as we said, it's the little things that you do every day that will make all the difference, and just know that you can be well, because I know a lot of people will listen and maybe they have a terrible diagnosis, and just know that, there's inspiration there. Mother Nature gives us everything that we need, and, you just need to tap into it.
Yeah, and just so they know, I've been doing this a long time, and my dad was a Silva instructor. He was a meditation instructor. My mother was actually a beautician, but she became more of a
Wow.
nutritionist. And over the years, I've been doing this over 40 years. I've seen everything that they have said cannot be healed get healed, as long as you
I
can
love
start.
that.
So
Yep.
today's the day to start. Don't wait
Yep.
till you get a diagnosis.
No.
Your best insurance is you taking care of your own health, because you can't buy health. You can buy good insurance, but what that is, that's called sick care. We want to have health care. So health care means invest in yourself. So go get the book, go to the landing page we're going to have below, check out the new book, The Lost Medicine, Rediscovering Mother Nature's Prescription, because that's where it is. That's where it's at. We always say the Vedas or the ancient traditions, they already knew what to do. They knew how to be healthy.
yeah.
The problem was that they were dying because of other things. They had to worry about a lot more things than we have to do. I mean, food shortages, famines, and things like that. Now we can throw a rock in any direction, hit three grocery stores.
Exactly.
We don't have to worry about that right now, and hopefully that will continue. So let's all work together, build a more harmonious, healthy world. Because when your energy is high, when your health is high, you're going to treat other people with more love and kindness. It's going to be a better place to live. So thank you, Dr. Janine, for being on the podcast. You're a valued guest, and we appreciate everything you're doing out there.
Oh, thank you so much. Likewise. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Brain Tap Nation, we're on a mission to better a billion brains. And if you've listened this far, congratulations, it's your brain we're talking about. So if you have your brain tap, take today, and when you're doing your visualization and looking over the future, just think about how you're bringing positive energy into your environment, changing your family, your community, your world. Because as we do it one at a time, once we get that collective of 1 billion people, remember, that's what we're doing, 1 billion people, let's get them all thinking positive, working on themselves, taking back their own health, taking back their own thoughts, and making the actions that are going to help us to have a healthier, wonderful world. So thanks again. Tune in next time for the Brain Fitness Podcast. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on our mission to better a billion brains. Follow at Dr. Patrick Porter on social media for updates, and remember to practice brain fitness every day.